welcome to Flory Models Daily Vlog. Here we are, Wednesday the 25th of January 2017. Today, to be honest, is just a day of generally getting on. Working on the A10, I've got various parts over there now. I've got the gun assembly going on over there. We've got the wings taken off the sprues, the bits and pieces like that. Down here I'm working on, so we're getting some of the photo etch work stuck onto this guy. And we're getting the installation of actually some of the bays that we're putting in here. So we've got the battery bay going in. I've got the circuit breaker. And the various bits and pieces which are going to be going into the back of this one, hopefully, will sit in here, something like that. So that's going to look very nice when it's all done and painted up. So it's all coming together very nicely. No problems so far. Little thing about putting the cockpit in, but we'll talk about that during the actual build a bit, a bit of a way around the problems. It is all coming together very, very nicely. And actually, I know it might seem like this is complete chaos and a mess and everything around here, but I'm thinking we're going to be able to get this thing together mid next week, because various subsections and everything's all coming together. It's coming together very quickly. And when you look at actually the box of what's in there, there isn't that much. It's not like a modern kit, if you know what I mean. I know this one isn't that old, but it's 10 years old now. But against some of the new stuff where you get like sprues and sprues and sprues, 5 of the big sprues in there are actually weapons, so it's not actually part of the kit. So I don't think it's going to be too bad of a problem. But anyway, it is going quite nicely. No problem so far. I'll report back to you. Part 1 of this will be up, I don't know, maybe Friday. As I say, I'm just chewing through it all at the moment, trying to sort all this out. And obviously I don't want to bore you to death during the sort of, you know, build of it. So I'll edit it out and give you something a little bit more concise. But generally it's coming along very nicely. And then obviously when we get to the more technical aspects of it, like painting cockpits and the engines and doing the gun paint work and everything else like that, we'll spend a little bit more time and I'll show you in depth on those. Being Wednesday, I thought it would be an idea, and to be honest, it's quite quiet. I'd run through some of the Q&As for me from the forum. I can go through them like that. Right, okay, Paul asks, hi Phil, wanted to know if you could sell your sanding sticks in packs of 3. I don't use the coarse ones as much as I do the medium and fine, and end up with just the coarse sanding sticks. I just thought it might be an idea, maybe packs of 2. Yeah, I know what you're getting at. I don't know, maybe something for the sales team to consider. I can pass it on to them. I take it, do you mean the bigger ones? These ones, where we do the coarse, medium and the fine of those, or do you mean like the skinnies and stuff like that? Because obviously the skinnies are available as a coarse, 12 coarse skinnies, 12 medium skinnies and 12 fine skinnies. These ones here, I don't know, we could perhaps do them in packs of 3 and everything else like that. It just makes it more affordable to do it that way, if that makes sense. As I say, because when you start doing just small little packs of like 1s and 2s of them, they're quite expensive for what they are, you know. Yeah, if we're doing like the bigger packs, because obviously you haven't got the packaging cost and all the rest of it, it actually brings the price down. That's why we do skinnies in packs of 12. It's just because it works right for the price point and stuff like that. But I will have a word with them. I'll pass it on and they'll make a decision at some point, knowing them. Okay, Greg says, hi Phil, love the site. The amount of resources available makes this hobby something I look forward to doing. Question, I was about to pick up the Rosie the Riveter after watching your recent builds. I do 148 stuff, most part, and have a few planes that could do with a little work to liven them up. I was wondering what size I should get to start out. Right, okay, so I've got, just hoping it's still in here, which is probably not now, which is a bit of a pain. No, I thought I had a size thing here. I obviously moved it. For me personally, I've got quite a collection. I'm one of these people that if I find something I really like, I'll just go out and get it all, because it is probably well worth it in the end. Now, some of these have got some sizes on them anyway, okay? So the 0.75 is designed, or on here, it does say for 1/48th, 1/32nd, okay? So there is that one. The 0.65 does say about being for 1/48, so if you're into that type of scale, then you may be looking at that one. The trouble with it is that, especially when I was working on the Meteor, when you start to use it, you think it doesn't look quite right, because the thing is, when you get down to the 1/72nd stuff, although it's very fine, it is so faint you can hardly see it, because not only is it the gaps between the teeth, it's the thickness of the teeth, and obviously that being the thickness of the hole. So I actually ended up on that one doing some of the panels to give them a more sort of latch look and things like that in sort of 1mm, which it does say on here is like 1/32nd. but actually I use that one quite a lot. But if you were asking me like which ones do I sort of, you know, use most of and all the rest of it, does tend to be the sort of bigger sizes. So I do use the 1mm a lot, I use the 0.75 a lot, and the 0.65, okay? When you're down to the other type of stuff, I'm just seeing which ones we go down here, you know, the 0.55s and stuff like that, I don't use those as much, purely because they are so fine. That said, I do a lot of, obviously, the bigger stuff. 1/48 steel, 1/32. I don't really do much stuff in the sort of 1/72. But also the thing is, you've got to think of that sort of scale effect. Are you going to be able to see rivets that clearly in 1/72? When you look at 1/72 aircraft, they tend to have the bigger ones you can see, but the little ones, they tend to be scaled out. So I would be thinking using the bigger scale. So if you're new to it, you know, the twin one is a beautiful thing. The triple one's really nice, but you're not going to use the triple ones as much as you probably would the single and the dual. But if you would, I would say get a 1mm one, and then perhaps go for a 0.75. Okay, and then that way you can sort of work your way through. And if you are finding it's a little bit heavy, then you can step down one perhaps to the 0.65, and then you can start going down to the 0.55s for very, very light stuff. But you want your riveting to be seen at the end of the day. It is going to be part of your model, okay? That's why you're putting it on there. If you wanted something that you could hardly see, then I wouldn't probably bother with it at that scale. So I would definitely go for the larger ones, so you say. But definitely, as I say, it's one of those things that, you know, it's not often I'll put my everything behind a product, but Rosie the Riveter definitely gets my mark because it is just absolutely a beautiful tool. If you want to have a look at it, just watch me freehand the entire doing the Meteor. You know, it's that trusting of a product where you know it's not going to wobble and go off and everything else. Straight line, yeah, we just put one of those in and it works an absolute treat. Right, so, and he's also saying that he can't wait to see the A10. Again, it will be up when it's up, but we're definitely getting on with it. It's coming together lovely. Robert says, hi Phil, new member to the forum from the US, Carolina to be exact, welcome. I've been watching a lot of the tutorial videos, trying to stay current as well. One question I have is with the Gloss Black series. It seems that those videos are relatively old. While watching the recent men build, you were using the same paint, Tamiya X1. I did not hear you say what you are currently thinning it with. In the old videos you were using a lacquer thinner from Mr. Hobby. I believe this is still true. Or if you moved on to a new thinner of choice. To be honest, no. This is now my most probably favourite tool all round. To be honest, lacquer thinner, even in your synthetic paints and stuff like that, and even true acrylics, but you're going to need to thin it a lot. Okay, this stuff is lovely. The thing is with self-leveling thinner, it's not just a lacquer thinner. This has obviously got some type of retarder in there. What this enables it to do is when you're spraying, the particles have obviously been atomized. As soon as they're atomized, they're drying because they're flying through the air. This keeps them wet, so when they hit the surface, they do that thing like a raindrop in water, they melt into the surface. Okay, so it physically goes on. It's not going to get a rough texture and all the rest of it. So the self-leveling thinner enables you to have a far smoother paint. For instance, if I'm putting it through Tamiya, you end up with almost like the flat range, more of a satin finish, and it's far nicer to work with. The great thing as well, being a lacquer, it goes, literally, it eats through everything. So if you ever have that problem of perhaps with your airbrushing, it's stopping and starting, or it splutters a bit and stuff like that, by using a lacquer thinner, it just keeps everything moving because nothing's drying. Because normally stopping and starting is build up on the needle and it's coating the needle. It's physically sticking to the needle and then it can stop. It causes a back pressure, get a bit, it spits it off and stuff like that. The lacquer just keeps everything nice because it's wet and it's just smooth and it's flowing and everything else like that. That's why I like it. But disclaimer, this is why I've gone out and spent half a fortune on a second spray booth, purely because this stuff is a lacquer. It's a little bit smelly, especially if you haven't got a booth, you will stink out the room. Okay, so just be mindful, health and safety, and obviously smells, there's everything else like that. This stuff is a hot product. Also, when we say it's a hot product, being a lacquer, it will melt styrene. So if you knock a bottle of this over all over your model, it will eat through it instantly. Whereas with acrylic thinners and stuff like that, you can just pat dry them and you're probably good to go. So just be mindful of it. It is a hot product, but it's a handy hot product to have around because you can thin everything with it, from putties through to paints, through to you name it, to glues, anything, it will do it. Okay, so it is a very nice one. But as I said, self-leveling thinner, probably one of my, you know, top 5 innovations that I've done over the last 5 years, where we switched over to using that, because I thin everything with it, even Vallejo. It thickens up. If you put a little drop in, it will thicken it. You add a little bit more, it will then thin it. Okay, so if you're even into a situation where you've got a product and it doesn't seem to thin, so perhaps, you know, you've got like a true acrylic, you put a lacquer into it, it goes to like glue. Keep thinning, it will then thin it, breaks it down, and it will spray it, and you have no problem at all with it. But as I said, think of it for the health reasons as well. If you're spraying it in a closed environment, kids around, pets around, stuff like that, just be mindful of it. It's not nice, okay? So just be a little bit aware of that one. And right, okay, where are we? Sorry, coming downwards. Chris says, hi Phil, I was wondering if you could provide any suggestions how to bend Photo X around a circumference. I'm looking to bend my Edard Brazin Messerschmitt BF 109 G6 engine set, which you reviewed, and bending the little thin PE circle looks tricky. Now for that, it's one tool I must admit I'm going to go out and invest and get one, and that is the roller system you can actually get for bending photo etch, and you've got various size rollers and things like that, and you can do it. The other way, and that's why I have it down here, because I don't need a mouse mat because I have a trackpad, but I use a mouse mat. So what I actually have is just, to be honest, these are available for models mouse mats, okay, but I'll put it down. You take your photo etch, which is, grab an old piece or something. See, look, that's why you keep your old sprues and bits lying around. Get it all stuck together. See, this is why I keep the old stuff. Okay, and then literally you can just grab it. And then obviously, depending on what you roll it with, will depend on how it rolls up. So you could use just a paintbrush, but if you've got a squidgy mat, okay, you can roll it and you'll get it will roll. Hopefully you can see that. I haven't got the other cameras on today, but you can physically bend it and roll it by using something like a mat, okay? And you can then, using different size tools, get different size circumference and everything else like that, okay? So obviously you can then, you know, by using a thinner paintbrush or something else like that, you can buy specific pieces of metal as well, which I have got behind me, which are probably buried in there. But I've got acrylic rod in various different diameters for rolling. But if you've got a soft mat, to be honest, a mouse mat's brilliant for it. But then just roll across, you can get it to bend up. And then don't forget, you've got the spring action with it as well. So then you can slightly pull it apart. You can then unroll it a little bit by just lightly going over it like this. So you can get the right curve. And this is just a way of doing it, okay? But you can buy, if you want to do the roller sets, which are like curves. Then you've got the actual metal roller that puts on there, and you can put your photo etch into it and physically roll it onto it, and you'll get that perfect curve every time. But from a cheap way, any type of round object and something like a soft object like a mouse mat is perfect for it. You can just literally come along. If we just do a smaller brush, you'll see what I mean. If we pop this down on here, okay, and then we roll this, you can see how you get different size circumferences. I'll just pull it out a little bit. And everything else like that. So yeah, a cutting mat, or sorry, a mouse mat is definitely a very nice tool to have, because it's just really, really helpful. But as I said, you can buy, and I do planning on investing in one, but to be honest, like on this and various bits and pieces, that's why it's here. I will pop it down, just give it a bit of a roll, test fit it, bit bigger, okay, bit more, overdone it, just pull it apart a little bit and get the right angle until it's ready to go, and then fit it like that. I know it's a cheap, simple trick, but it works. Okay, and David says, hey Phil, love watching your videos, watching your airbrush. Painting away has always been my weak point. If I could spray out of a can, I'd get it done. Now I've set up a spray booth and I have to give it airbrushing a go. Speaking of booths, you're quite adamant about using an extractor. However, Steve and Hans shown airbrushing. They don't seem to be using one. Why not? Ask them. No, Steve does. Steve's got one of these, but it's the different one. It's the plastic round it. But he does use his. If you look at some of the ones we've been spraying recently, he does go in there. The thing is, when we're showing you guys, it's that thing. I'm lucky, that's why we've built this and have this set up all here, so I can show you with the cameras. They don't have the luxury of any camera work and everything else, so they tend to have their cameras just around the desk so they can show you guys, so that's why they spray it there. Hans, I know, doesn't, but then Hans is in a slightly different environment. Before, he was in this huge basement area he had, so it wasn't really a problem. Now he's in his nice new posh place, he might be investing in one. I always say though, it's the big three. When you're going to be airbrushing, you know, obviously you think of an airbrush, okay? Then you've got to think of some propellant, okay? So you're thinking compressor, and then you're going to need somewhere to put all of this stuff, because let's face it, and you know, we'll all admit it, it's a smelly, dirty process airbrushing, because if you don't use it, you get overspray everywhere, but also the big thing is dust, okay? When you're spraying this stuff, it is airborne. Mainly acrylics are the worst one for it, but this stuff goes airborne and it travels for absolute ages, you know, and as you say, if you go round to anywhere and you're just touching, you know, tops of books and various things, you get this layer of dust over absolute everything. An extractor, as long as you're using it properly, i.e. good filters, clean filters, and it's going and it's actually turned on, will be fine. But many a time I've seen YouTubers especially, and there they are, they're spraying away, and I'm thinking, why aren't you using an extractor? You've got an extractor there. Or they'll have an extractor and it's turned on and running and they're spraying like this, instead of spraying physically into the extractor and getting rid of it. Okay, because as I said, it's one of those things where it's only as good if you're using the tool correctly. And extractors, you want a hood round it ideally and spraying at it. The reason I have two, I know a lot of people have asked questions, especially the YouTube guys, why do I need two? Because I can't actually put a hood around mine because I won't be able to get the cameras in. By having two, it gives me enough draw, no matter where I'm doing it here, it goes that way. And in testing, it's quite funny because I actually put one of the cameras in the corner of the room and watched me airbrushing. Now, before I did it, it was for just one of those sort of, you know, B-rolled films when I used to do the vlogs with music and that. You could see it physically going everywhere around me. It wasn't going in there, even though I'm spraying at it, because I was spraying so heavy, it was sort of hitting and coming back, and you could see it rolling around me and all the rest of it in a couple of the little shots. Now though, with two running, I get nothing of that at all, and you can physically see it all going in. And when I was testing it, to be honest, I was lighting bits of paper and then blowing it out and seeing the smoke trail. If I put it here, you would see it just come up like this and go straight out. And with two running, and you don't have any problem with it. But as I said, I am quite an advocate for them, and it's just that health and safety thing. You don't want to be breathing it in at the end of the day. And I do have respirators, I've done videos on them, you've seen them and everything else, but I can't talk to you guys with that on because I'm going to sound like Darth Vader. But with two running, when I'm spraying, it's literally just coming out of my airbrush. Hopefully it's going onto the model. What isn't is going through the filter, through the extractor and out, and that's what you're paying for with this one especially. I know it's 280 quid, but it's money well spent, you know, because as I say, lasts a lifetime. It's a one-off investment and you're good to go with it. Right, Bjorn says, hi Phil, any tips on sanding and gluing and painting small, thin, fragile parts like landing gear, antennas, weapons, exhaust pipes, etc. My builds usually go very well until I get to these parts and things get messy, ugly and crooked. True. Right, usually though, if I'm doing antennas and stuff like that, it does tend to be down to how you're actually doing it. If you've got like a sprue tab on there, what I'll tend to use is, it's over there to be honest because I've been working on the gun over there, I use obviously the cutters to get as close as I can and everything else, but then I will then switch to like a medium sanding stick, lay it down if I can, sand it, turn it over, sand it, because say if you're holding it and you do it, that's when things break. The other thing as well, if you're trying to clean up parts, is these things are absolutely great. If you're doing antennas, if you're doing any sort of round pipes, exhaust, stuff like that, or even flat stuff, these, where's the other one? There's another one around here somewhere. Here it is. I've been using, especially like on this to be honest, quite a lot, are like deburring tools. They're flat pieces of metal. They're made by Alex. There's a review on those. Have a look at that as well in the review section. And basically what these will do is they will take things off, and because you're not pushing down, you're sort of scraping up, it easily will cut through and clean up the part with no problem at all. So if you're using sort of round things, I will use this one because this is the one for rounds. If it's flat and 90 degrees, I use this guy. If it's inside curves, obviously I've got this one now as well. So between all three of them I can clean up the parts. But it is that thing about putting pressure on stuff and not trying to break it. And for instance, when we've been sanding in here, we got this little guy out. I had to cut this, you'll see about it. I just use the Dremel in there and slice it, but I had to sand it. Well, obviously this is quite a thin bit of plastic. Again, it's that thing about letting the sander do the work. When you're coming in, you don't want to be pushing at it, because all you're going to do is snap this off, okay? But at the same time, you've got to put enough pressure in there to make it work. But that's what the sander's for. So let the sander do the work. So you just lightly, and okay, it takes a little bit longer, but you'll have a cleaner, nicer finish to it, and you can just sand things off and do it that way. But generally, it's that thing about, you know, taking your time with it, not being quite as forceful. Sometimes it does pay, you know, sort of dividends, and it saves you time. Sometimes you think, oh, I just need to do this quick job, and you break it, then you've got to glue it back together and all the little problems that can occur with it. Other things, though, are naturally always going to break. For instance, for some reason, Airfix pitot tubes and stuff like that, it's like a weakness in their plastic. The way it's like the outer core of it is always firm, but inside it's soft. And I don't know why, but if you ever break one, they don't just bend, they just snap. And you look at it and you always get a little cup and a dome. And it's just something that will always happen. But I know, because it happened to me again with when I did the Meteor. The pitot tube just snapped. All the thin stuff. So sometimes it does depend also on the quality of the styrene the manufacturer is using. If they're using, sorry Airfix, a lower quality one, then you can get that happen. Okay, if you're using perhaps some of the better companies, Tamiya, that type of thing, they don't tend to break quite as easy as that. But some things naturally just will break. Unfortunately, that's just the thing to it. Right, okay, God, that's a long question. Okay, right, okay, so Robert says, we'd love to see you do a show all about flow improvers, retarders, self-leveling thinners, and regular thinners, and how to use them with various paint types. There's so much misinformation out there that's outright conflicting information. You frequently touch on these subjects. I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit, but basically he goes on to say the difference between enamels, acrylics and lacquers, frequently asked in the forum. Again, it's a big thing. It's not something I can just sit here and just rattle off. Personally, for me, if I'm using an acrylic, and I'm using traditional painting and all the rest of it, if I'm finding my painting or my airbrushing is stopping and starting, okay, and it's not exactly giving me good control over my airbrush, I'll immediately give it a hit with, and I've got some over here, different types I think. I've got Flow Improver, where's my new ones? There it is. So this is my go-to that I've been using this bottle, and we are still probably got 80% of a bottle left for the last 15 years. This is Flow Improver. It's just an acrylic flow improver. Okay, the other thing I've got here, which is this weird stuff, is this, which is Retarder Medium, which Steve swears by, so that's why I got a bottle, but I haven't used it yet, which is water-based. Okay, and this is by Vallejo. I'm just looking at the number. The number is 70.597. Okay, he says this is great. Couple of drops and you're good to go. And the nice thing is, because it's in a dropper bottle, you can just go 1-2 drops into a 5ml colour cup and you're good to go. All right, but I'm always a great believer in you sort of listen to your airbrush. So if you're in a situation where your airbrush, it just doesn't sound like it's flowing right, it sounds crackly almost, it's not just a constant nice flow, it's struggling, then I will then probably hit it with a little bit of retarder, a little bit more thinners, and away you go. But a lot of the time now, if I'm honest, I'm just using self-leveling thinners. Okay, I don't seem to have a problem with it. It works quite well. The temperature in this room's pretty constant. Today's a bit colder, to be honest, but even in the summer when it's really warm, I would just perhaps use a couple of drops of Flow Improver just in there, and away you go. But the thing is, it's that thing where if you're using an enamel, obviously, you know, retarders and stuff like that don't really come into it. Tends to be an acrylic problem with acrylic paints, but you can obviously get retarders for oils as well to slow them down drying and stuff like that. But if you're using lacquer, like a self-leveling thinner, that's got a retarder in it as well. So it's more to do with air pressure than anything else. If you're high air pressure, it's going to be drying very quickly. You might think you're doing your airbrush a favour because it's blowing it all out and all the rest of it, but actually it's drying stuff quicker as well. That's why when you're doing things like lacquers and you're using perhaps metal finishes and stuff like that, that's why they talk about putting them down at such a lower air pressure. So it's just gently layering it onto the model. Instead of blasting it on and pushing it on and pressing it away, you're actually lowering the air pressure to put it down. But that's because it's a thinner material, so you can actually be able to do that. Okay, like MRPs, they spray like ink. That's the great thing with them. You don't get any blockages or problems with that because they are so thin naturally. It does tend to be more of an acrylic problem, but as I said, it's not just that thing where you can just say, oh, you want to do this, you need to do that, because the trouble is it's very much environmental. So you get a guy who's in Florida, okay, and you get a guy that's in Arizona, you might have two different problems, because obviously you've got, there's more sort of humidity, or you've got zero humidity and things like that. So it just is that thing, knowing your environment and then knowing what works for you. So if you're in those type of environments, then certain products might work, but say it to somebody else, it could be completely irrelevant. Here in the UK, it's quite mediocre all the time, so we don't tend to have the trouble. But I know Hans, for instance, he's high altitude, very thin, there's very little humidity there. In the summer, his spraying might suffer. So like he'll say, sometimes you get a little bit of texture. If you're using MRP paint, stuff like that, he always says just about giving it a coat of self-leveling thinners, neat, right over the model, just melts it all down, makes it all nice, and away you go. That's his environment. I technically don't have that problem very often. So from that point of view, it's very hard to turn around and say this is what you need to do. But as we spoke about before, self-leveling thinners in anybody's paint, you'd be good to go with it. You shouldn't really have a problem with it at all. So that's about it. I'll do some more questions with you next week. To be honest, on the question front, we are back live this Sunday, 5 p.m. UK time. I can't remember what the American ones were off the top of my head. And all the rest of it. It's going to be around about midday, I think, obviously New York side of things, and then sort of central, it's going to be sort of, 10 and sort of a bit earlier than that if you're going to be over the other side. But anyway, it's back to our sort of Sunday show. Now, the Sunday show is going to be slightly different. It's not just going to be like a Q&A show. What we're going to do, or what we've asked for you to do, is post up your questions now. We're going to pre-do them. So what we'll do is perhaps we'll get things ready to show you. So like we said, if you've got a question, that's quite in depth, we can sort of paraphrase it instead of having to read out the entire question, and then show you live how to fix a particular problem. So if you've got a particular thing on, weathering, or you've got a particular problem on gluing or sanding and filling, we can get the stuff all sort of ready for it, and perhaps do a little bit of pre-work for it, so it's quicker and it flows better for you guys to actually watch it. The show's only going to be 2 hours as well, so no more of us drearing on for 3.5, 4 hours, 5 hours at a time. Okay, so it should be sharper, quicker, punchier, and everything else. But you can join us live. So it's me, Hans, and Steve. We're going to be with you. We're not quite sure on the format yet. Maybe every other week, so every 2 weeks on a Sunday afternoon or evening or morning, depending where you are in the world, or if you're in Australia, Monday, and we can see and talk to you like that and answer a lot more of your questions. But I'll be back doing my personal ones as and when I can as well. So that's it from me. I'm going to carry on with this guy, pushing through with that one. I'll catch you all tomorrow. Also, don't forget, up today we've actually got the Balsa foam review. Funny as hell stuff to work with, but actually it's one of those things, after I finished doing it, I carried on and using it and playing with it and everything else like that, and absolutely love the stuff. It's one of those things that when you're first given it, you're thinking, what am I going to do with it? And then you start looking at stuff and seeing what other people are doing with it, and then you have a play with it yourself and you think, this stuff is unlimited. You could use it for anything. You could use it in here, or on an aircraft. You could just craft up a bit you need and just like carve a bit up, put it in, and away you go. Very, very simple stuff, easy stuff to work with. It's basically, if you imagine like an oasis from the florist, the thing you stick flowers in, but imagine that really tight, and you can carve, sand, cut, whatever you want to do with it, and then just overpaint it and you're good to go. So actually it's quite a very nice product. Not cheap, I'll give you that, but actually for what it is, I haven't seen anything that comes close to it. So there we go, that's it from me. I'll catch you all tomorrow.